Hello, welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us today as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. Well, yesterday we left David and his band of men and their families in a city just outside of the Philistine city of Gath. The Philistines are actually preparing for another conflict with Saul, what will actually end up being the final conflict with Saul. And they're trying to manipulate things so that they have David as an ally rather than an enemy. Now, David is leading a complicated life at this point. His men are raiding Israel's enemies, even though they are keeping the Philistines in the dark and leading the Philistines to believe that they're raiding cities in Jerusalem. Today, we're going to read another four Psalms that speak to the conflict, the difficulty that David is facing, not only with him having been pursued by Saul, although now that he is in Philistine territory, Saul has stopped pursuing him. But all of these things combined just make life very complex and difficult for David. Psalm 17 is the first psalm we're going to read today. It's clearly written by a man tortured in his soul and his mind. You know, our English translation presents this psalm in a very coherent manner, and you won't necessarily pick it up. But in the Hebrew, it's filled with disjointed thoughts and broken or partial sentences. As David prays to God, his mind is anxious, his heart is fearful, and his soul is filled with vexation and puzzlement. Why hasn't God rescued me yet? When will God attend to my cry? I mean, maybe you felt, actually, I'm sure that at some point in time you felt as David feels. You know and you trust that God will deliver you and that God will satisfy you and that God will give his promises, will fulfill his promises to you. But why does it have to take so long? Jesus brings us peace when our insides are all torn up. Remember how he told us to leave our yoke with him and to take up his yoke because it's light and it's easy. Come to Jesus. Trust in the promises of God. This is how we leave our yoke behind and carry the yoke that Jesus gives us. Our next psalm for today is Psalm 35. It conveys the urgency that David feels. He repeats over and over again that he wants God to execute his judgments on those who persecute him. As you're reading this, you might even wonder, is this even really a proper prayer? And yet David has been unjustly pursued. He's been oppressed for no reason. He seems to desire to turn the tables, not the other cheek, but the tables. Remember that David has a relationship with God. God's made promises to him. When will those promises be delivered on? This prayer really can be ours as well, but only when our eyes are firmly fixed on Jesus. For it is the desire to see God's promises fulfilled that drives this prayer. Indeed, on the last day, the wicked will all be utterly destroyed and the righteous will receive their redemption in full. That's ultimately what we're praying for. And when that happens, we too, like David, will praise God forever. Do you remember yesterday how the Ziphites tried to turn David over to Saul? Well, Psalm 54 addresses that time directly. It's brief, but in it, David pleads that God would save and vindicate him because strangers are trying to, erase his life. David acknowledges that it's God alone that can help him and sustain him. So David will offer sacrifices and he will praise God's name. And then our final psalm, Psalm 63, finds David in the wilderness. Only this time, he seems to refer to himself as king. So maybe this was written when he had fled Absalom rather than in the time frame that we're talking about right now. We're not really told, we don't know for sure, but it's a possibility. Just the same, David longs to return to the sanctuary. He longs to praise God. It's his food and his drink to praise God. Those who oppose the Lord or his faithful will find themselves silenced for all eternity, at least with respect to God and his people. But God's people will sing his praise without end. And those are the themes that run through the 63rd Psalm of David. Well, may God be with you and bless you. I pray that these Psalms speak to you, that they'll help you to grow, they'll help you to that strengthen your faith, especially as you see that others, in particular King David, who wrote these Psalms, struggle with many of the same things that you struggle with. I look forward to meeting with you again the next time. May God be with you and bless you.